like everything else in my life, I went too far with it at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't have the framework. I was buying monkeys. So whenever I
Yeah.
started taking psychedelics, I was gonna do it probably a little excessively. I was like, please teach me more, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it so much, I was doing it a lot. I mean, I was taking a lot of LSD, a lot of psilocybin daily, sometimes for weeks,
Wow.
kind of stuff. Very, very intense. And there was a period of time that I was kind of not fully stuck in that state,
Mm-hmm.
but it was kind of terrifying because I got to a point where I had sort of blown that system, so far open, and my brain wasn't healthy enough where it was readapting. So I was kind of stuck in a pseudo trip state for a period of time, which was kind of terrifying and maddening. And I thought that I wasn't going to come back. And eventually I did, because I learned how to balance my physical brain and get it stronger and put more energy in my brain and allow it to adapt better, train my brain down with different types of, interventions, whether it be, the things that I did to get myself well, or other things as well. And I did. And then I had the advantage of having spent a lot of time in those states so I was able to learn a lot whenever I was in those states, even though it was difficult. So I experienced a hint of that, but some people, if they don't have strategies in place and they have fragile brain chemistry, or if they're that susceptible, because that's mainly what schizophrenia is. There's some sort of a fragile subset of chemistry in the body that they either induced by environment or sometimes induced by genetics. Genetic susceptibility is normally the thing, right? And then it's triggered, and the person just doesn't know the triggers and doesn't even have that ability or that understanding that there is a way that they could, or they're too mentally ill to even like do anything about it, kind of thing. So, but if you have a proclivity towards not being grounded, a proclivity towards manic or impulsive behaviors, a proclivity towards especially full-blown schizophrenia, if you have like a fragile framework in your brain that is one that's hard to keep grounded, right? If you're not a person that can easily get very grounded and very, sort of rooted to yourself in reality, if you already have a thin grasp on it, if you're someone that's more kind of floaty because you're mentally ill or fragile, then it's something to think about. And it's something you need to be more cautious, right? And a lot of people don't necessarily know that because they don't think in terms, they don't know that there's someone who's not grounded, because sometimes that's part of not being grounded, right?
Yeah.
But
so how are you gonna know?
That's it's true, but it just means that no matter what, you need to think about these things and if you're going to do it, dip your toe in slowly and monitor and be aware. Okay, how much are my behaviors changing? How are the circumstances in my life of structure and discipline and all of the basically the metrics that are going to approximate groundedness, right? Structure, discipline, routine, all of that stuff are characteristics of being grounded and like rational and like those things that are good. Some people can be too far in that and not have enough of their higher self. But if you start to lose those things and you start to become some person that's more all about ideas and no execution, no structure, no nothing, that's a good sign. If you're someone that already struggles with that, be more aware of that and understand that psychedelics are going to bring you to the opposite place of that. And so you need to build a strong structure to keep you tied to the ground. So whenever you blow up that hot air balloon, it doesn't pull you off, because it's a big one,
Yeah.
So because at the end of the day, there's, from my perspective, there's no reason to do psychedelics without proper integration of the lessons that you learn. It's a tragedy when someone has, visionary experiences induced by anything, psychedelics or not, and then they don't follow through on integrating those lessons into their life, right? It's unused potential, and it's really, really, it's a tragedy whenever you have that. And it will actually drive you mad, and it can drive you mentally ill. Whenever you see something in your life, whenever you're shown something and you have a realization, then now that's always in the back of your mind. So now so if you don't follow through, then it drives you mad even more. So sometimes this is a phenomenon a lot of people talk about. People who are not ready to follow through on the integration execution period, and they do psychedelics, they can act, and if you're an addict, it can actually drive you farther into addiction. And I've seen this before. Wow. Because if they're not ready to integrate it, they see how terrible of a thing, they're doing is a lot of times. But then once they dive back into it, it drives them farther. So they have to build more of a cocoon of denial, and they have to double down even harder on their addiction if they're not willing to deal with it in order to escape from that realization. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So it could like
Um,
reinforce the addiction or reinforce the problem because they were exposed to a great level of awareness. I think I lost you.
year.
Oh, there you go. We're back.
Oh, there. We're
This
back.
is a
Yeah,
good point,
good.
though. Let's keep going on this. This is amazing.
Hold on.
Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I can hear you. Yeah, you're good. Yeah. No. So that's something that I've rarely heard people talk about, especially whenever talking about people going into psychedelics to treat addictions. Is that you have to understand, again, that's the risk side, right? If you're not, if you are not someone who is seeking resolution, and sometimes, you find the desire to seek resolution in the experience, right? And so a lot of times people that was me, right? It's like I didn't even know that there was something to seek resolution to, and I found the desire in it, and that's where the risk comes in, right? But I will tell you, if you cannot find the desire, the means, the understanding, and the determination to take what you experience and integrate it and to build something out of it, to take what you've seen and then bring it into your life, and actually, because anyone can have a visionary experience, anyone can have a perspective or a perception. Following through is the hard part, right? Walking through that door is the hard part. But if you're not willing to do it, sometimes that can drive you mad, because now you've seen your potential, and when you don't follow through with it, it can drive you more into some pretty severe self-worth issues, because and again, it can make things worse. So I've seen that too. I've seen people relapse even harder because they're trying to escape what they now know to be the truth.
So now we're in the realm of integration. And I'll say this, again, when in my younger years, when I had tried either acid or mushrooms, psilocybin, that I didn't even question or think about preparation, let alone having a guide, let alone even knowing there was a thing called integration. And I'll say I've had an experience with Bufo one time. And I remember getting an email prior to, as far as like some things I should probably know going into it in relation to also integration. And in that email, it was talking about 30 days to allow yourself to even have 30 days to start processing this experience. And I gave it like 2 days and went right back into work. And I had no idea how important integration was. And that was one of the hardest things, just like 2 days later, going back into what you're talking about, this structured, grounded, kind of laid out way of life in which I've created, because I'm kind of on that side where I'm maybe a little bit too rigid sometimes. And that's why psychedelics for me has been great for helping me let go of that. But I didn't know. Man, I didn't know, like I was still having those types of experiences like up to a week to 2 weeks later, where if I sat to like meditate, I would go right back into the state in which when I was blasting off with Bufo. So could you maybe talk about, because like one element to the integration was like the tool was still kind of like working on me, or you could say like the medicine was still in my system. But then also there's what you just mentioned, which is I just learned or saw or got exposed to some potential lessons that I could implement in my life that would allow me to change or step into other opportunities that I haven't stepped into yet. So what is integration all about? How do you view it? And what is a way in which we can learn from those experiences and bring it into our lives?
Yeah. It takes I mean, that's why, exactly like you said, the first time around, whenever you were younger and you tried psychedelics, and I hear this a lot. I just happened to be in a position where the first time I took psychedelics, I was also in a time where I was kind of ready to hear the lessons, and I was kind of desperate because things were breaking down so much in my life. But that's the experience that I hear a lot of times from people is that they tried psychedelics earlier on in their life whenever they didn't have the structures, the tools, the desire in place to actually seek. And so they resisted a lot of what was there, and they just saw the glamour show. They just saw the lights and the sounds, and they just saw
Yeah.
the shapes, and they just saw that instead of like taking a peek behind the curtain and seeing what was created at all. Because a lot of times when you're young, it's just you're so enamored. Terrence McKenna used to have this. He had this saying is, "Don't give in to astonishment." Right? Whenever you take psychedelics, right? And whenever you're young, you're just sitting there and you're just watching the show, and you can just be in another world, and you're like, that was cool. I don't know what the hell it is I just saw, and I don't really care because I'm a kid. I don't really care that much. But whenever you get older, you're seeing the nuances and things. You've been broken down a little bit more, and you're more fascinated by the fact that this show is even taking place in front of you, and you want to know a little bit more generally, like, especially if you're someone who's suffered a lot, and you're someone that has kind of been through the gambit, been down, the pleasure train, like a few times, when you realize that that's an empty rat race, or that's an empty hamster wheel. And you're like, no, okay, so I want to know what's behind things. I want to know why. I want to see the meaning in things. And being under that state, it allows you to. And so you're already seeking something. And so now you are in a position to where the mindset is correct. And then you've now been expanded to this higher perceptual state. So now you have everything that you need to travel those roads. Now, once you've traveled those roads and had that mindset of wanting to seek is the precursor to proper integration, but it doesn't guarantee it, because, like I said, seeking can actually still be kind of a glamorous experience too, right? Whenever you're, even if you're having an experience, there's a lot of people that talk a lot, that take psychedelics, and they'll sit and have long conversations about it, right? And they want to dig deep in it. But then once the psychedelic wears off and they have to face the mundane, perceivably mundane circumstances of their life, and break down their old structures and apply what they've learned, and really get their hands dirty in the muck of it all, and break down the toxic relationships, break down the toxic, career path, or the toxic circumstances, get that stuff out of there, and then start from scratch many times in their life with certain things, and maybe other things not. They're like, you know what? That was fun. That was interesting. I like truth, and I like that. That's all fun and games, but not that much. I don't like it that much. I kind of like that pleasure train a little bit, and I'm just gonna like do that, and then can possibly drive you a little bit mad because some what's out there, like I said. But you just, there's a deep desire that can't be taught, that can't be coached. It can only happen through a person's life experiences. It can certainly happen through great mentorship and having good people in your life, for sure. But at the end of the day, there are people, places, circumstances, events that can open doors for you, and psychedelics can open doors. You can use great guides or people in your life afterwards that have nothing to do with psychedelics after the doors are open. You can use all kinds of these tools to open these doors, but at the end of the day, you are the one that has to walk through it, and you have to have that spark of inspiration ignited. And sometimes the experience itself, like with me, was enough to do that. Like it showed me that it connected me enough with that fundamental part of myself that wanted just good things in life, that wanted to progress as a human being, that saw the meaning and the purpose, that understood that the only happiness that you can attain really comes in the form of fulfillment, and fulfillment comes from the pursuit of meaning and purpose, and the meaning and purpose comes through the adoption of responsibility. The most meaningful things in your life are things that you have to work for, to build, that you have to have some sort of discipline to do them. That's why people are attracted to those things. Most things that take discipline, and most things that have the highest meaning and purpose, are not fun all the time. In fact, many times they're the hardest things, So like, for example, having kids, right? Having kids is one thing that is one of the highest forms of meaning and purpose that some people find. And then for some people, it's their occupation or their other, life trajectory. But let's just use, having kids as an example. It's like, do you think that that's fun all the time? Does it feel good all the time? No, it sucks a lot of the time. I mean, that's hard. Like being a parent, like you watch this, like Like, you're dealing with all kinds of crap. You're worrying constantly from the time that that kid is born, right? And you're having to take on this massive responsibility, take care of this baby, and it's crying and feeding it, and then going to work and allocating like half of your funds towards raising this child. But because there's meaning in it, because you're breathing life, or you're helping facilitate the development of this human, and you're helping to facilitate the shape of that thing in either a positive or negative trajectory, that responsibility on that, if you take on that responsibility and you embrace it, the kind of connection, the kind of love, and the kind of fulfillment that you get out of that is something that's as big as it gets. And that can happen, you know, with other relationships as well too. And it can happen with life purpose trajectories, like certain careers, especially careers that involve, you know, giving towards something that's outside of yourself. It doesn't have to be a career. It can be anything that you're involved in that's doing it. But the thing is that what's going to give you the greatest meaning and purpose in your life and fulfillment is either personal growth. And this is a Tony Robbins thing, is either personal growth or giving, right? So that means, you know, what you obtain in life will never fulfill you and make you happy, but who you become and what you contribute will, right? And so I do believe it's like, you know, growing will make you happy, and giving will make you 10 times more happy, hands down. And the social sciences totally back this up too. I think anyone who really is engaged in that kind of lifestyle would you know, it would certainly attest to that. And I do believe that we're meant to grow so that we can give, because we can't give what we don't have. And growing is the process of creating abundance in your life, resources, whether it be monetary, whether it be knowledge, whether it be, you know, the ability to, you have something to offer. It's like, we know this because we've been at rock bottom places in our lives, or we've been, you know, either on drugs or this or that, and we have nothing. And at that point, we have nothing to offer people, right? Like, we don't have advice to offer people. We certainly don't have resources to offer people. We can't take care of anybody. We can't do anything but suck off of people.
I offer darkness.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you become like
Vader.
a vampire that you just steal from people, and you'll never be happy. And so you'll run more towards pleasure, and pleasure is different than happiness. Pleasure is just excitement or a feeling that you can induce through some sort of stimulus, but it's not happiness, right? And so you can be incredibly sad, but still be fulfilled. You see what I'm saying? Like, you can be suffering, but be fulfilled and not be depressed, right? If you're suffering for a purpose, you can be suffering tremendously and not be depressed, right? But but you can feel really good with drugs or with whatever, you know, pick your stimulus, and be totally empty and rotting on the inside and be depressed, right? And celebrities, many of them know that. You know, there's a lot that have gone there. That's one example, because they have endless opportunities for pleasure, and they're sheltered from growth because everyone does everything for them, and it creates this circumstance where if you're not very diligent, you can go down that road. But anyways, that's relevant because people understanding that personal responsibility is ultimately what it's the ticket. It's personal sovereignty. It's personal responsibility is the ticket towards finding purpose. And that piece has to be understood, whether it be in the midst of a psychedelic experience or outside of it through trauma or whatever, for you to actually have that human sovereignty, like that energy awakened inside you that makes you want to integrate and stop at nothing to integrate, you know, because nothing else is more important, right? It's like, if someone, like, you know, people have asked, you know, before when we've been in conversations, like, what it's like, people ask me this question, talk about a massive question. It's like, oh, what do you think the meaning of life is? It's like, okay, well, if I had to give an answer to that question, I would say the meaning of life as a human being, and this is just my, you know, perspective, this is my limited perspective, would be to conduct yourself in a way through which life improves, right? For you and everybody else, to where it objectively improves, right? To where you're moving, you and your environment are having life breathed into it, meaning more abundance is being created, or more health is being created, right? Or there's a growth and there's a trajectory. There's something that's measurable, right? How do you know if you're crazy or if you're on the money with, you know, whatever perspective or you know, or direction you're taking in life? Well, is your ship sinking, right? The proof is in the pudding. What are you creating in your life? Are you creating healthy relationships, friendships? Are you creating abundance? Or is the earth crumbling, beneath your feet? Because I guarantee there's a lot of drug addicts out there that would claim that they're fine and claim that they're doing great. But is your ship sinking? Hell yeah, it is, So it's like, so at the end of the day, understanding that there is no better place, for me, it's just like, what would I do with my time except try to give everything I have at this point to just being as good as I can be, trying to learn, trying to grow, because I know that if I invest in growth, for me and people around me, just do everything I can there, then everything gets better. The people I love's life are better, right? I'm a better friend. I'm not a father at this point, but if I was, then I would be. And, people out there, friend, husband, father, brother, sister, you're a better business owner, business partner. You're better at everything. And so that understanding has to come out. And I think all of that kind of lives inside of us. And that's like, you see this with people under psychedelics, that desire gets awakened because they realize some sort of truncated version, I think, of what, we just discussed, is understanding that difference between victim mentality and personal responsibility leading to purpose. And if you have that, no matter how hard it is, you will never stop trying to improve your circumstances, and you will take everything that you've learned, absorb it like a sponge. And if you fail 100 times at integration, it's fine. You learn from it, you get back up, because there's nothing better to do with your time.
Yep. What are you going to do anyway?
Yeah.
Well, you could go into the world crumbling beneath you if you want. The option is always there. So I know we don't have a ton of time, and this is going to be like a record scratching. I would love to dive into, if we could fast forward, Kava before we hop off, because I know we talked about times in terms of when you got a call and what I got to do here after this podcast. So if we do have some time, it'd be great to dive into, like, okay, how did you find or come across Kava, and what drew you to it so much to where you decided, you know what, I'm going to make a crazy high quality Kava product to help other people? Like, how did that happen? Like,
well, and I don't know if you have, more time, but I actually have a little bit more time than I thought. I had someone signaling to me here. I've got at least 30 minutes longer than I thought. So
I'm good.
So it just depends on you. So we can go into this a little bit. So basically that kind of, a lot of that kind of gives some good context to my thought process and the underpinning of what kind of drove me into this and got me to push so deep into it. Kava is one of the things that I'm involved in. It's probably like the main project that I'm in, as far as it's just my projects. But when I was in the midst of my process, I got sicker and sicker after I went off the Adderall, the drugs, and all that kind of stuff. And that led me into an entire odyssey of scouring medical and scientific literature over a number of years to go outside the allopathic model. I traveled around, engaged in medical tourism, spoke to doctors, tried different shotgun therapies physically, did all kinds of stuff, just dove into everything. And one thing led to another to try to get answers to my health.
Medical tourism. I'm sorry, that just stood out in my mind. I don't want to break your train of thought here. That's freaking amazing. Medical tourism. Jesus.
That's what it was. And whenever
amazing.
You go on an odyssey to find answers and you can't, that's what it is. That's what it feels like, is you're literally going from state to state and country to country. And you're just literally just, all right, what do you got? You're seeing different doctors, like, okay, all right, let's try this again. It's like, okay, let's go again. Okay. And then trying to understand it. And you end up learning a tremendous amount by sort of, curating and truncating a large amount of information. But anyways, that period of time gave me a good fundamental understanding of not only biology, but biochemistry and, even, the energetic standpoint of things. And I had to dive into the fundamental, what is the human body? How does the biochemistry work? Health and disease at a cellular level. What are we trying to do in regenerative and functional medicine to regenerate the cells? What has actually gone wrong pathology wise? So I had to realize that. I had to investigate that. And that took a lot of investigation over a period of time to kind of pull together the picture. And it wasn't just one person that helped me assimilate it, or it wasn't just one paper. It was assimilating a lot of experts, a lot of time, a lot of stuff. So anyways, I spent, several years getting worse and worse while I was doing all this and having a bunch of failed attempts at this, right? every therapy you can imagine. And I was getting sicker and sicker. And it wasn't until I got aligned with this one network of functional medicine physicians, one guy in particular who I became a client of his. I'd worked with a lot of doctors, but he helped me to sort of pull together and build a roadmap for how I integrate all these individual pieces, because all these different individual pieces that eventually got my life back, whether it be, the dietary approach, the neurofeedback or brain training stuff, psychedelic integration, regenerative medicine, things like stem cells and stuff like that, detoxification strategies, all of those things are like individual bricks, right? And a house is made out of bricks, but a pile of bricks is not a house, right? So you have a lot of people trying to get their life back in that, or, in any way, whether they're trying to get their physical health back or their mental health back. And they try these shotgun things, these one things, this one type of therapy, this one thing. And really, if you throw everything in a pile, yeah, you've got a pile of bricks and it's better than nothing. But if you understand how to arrange them in a system of when and how to apply them together to where it's a synchronistic harmony, just like your body is in a lot of ways, then that's where the magic happens, right? It's like if you're, I use this metaphor too. It's like if you're baking bread. If I bake yeast by itself, nothing happens. If I bake water by itself, nothing happens. If I bake flour by itself, nothing happens. I put them together, boom, we have an effect, right? And so there's a synergy there. So anyways, it took me a long time to learn that, but once I got aligned with this network of doctors, I had a lot of strategies and I had a good game plan going. But actually, during the process, I developed a syndrome of chemical, food, and environmental sensitivities that was substantial. And that's a long story of how that comes about. But basically, it's severe autoimmune disease. It's becoming more and more common. People, it's a form of PTSD where you develop crazy food allergies and sensitivities to almost everything that you're eating. It can be some things, but for me, it was so bad, it was everything. And it happens because the gut health is destroyed. Your intestines become permeable. Things start leaking across over time. You get systemic autoimmunity because you're priming the immune system. The whole system is broken down in a lot of ways. You end up very neuro and tissue toxic, and then it drives autoimmunity further because your immune and nervous system is so traumatized that it's spitting out defense responses because it's been slapped in the face so many times. It's trying to punch back, right? So basically, I ended up in this syndrome where I was reacting violently to almost everything that I was taking, supplement-wise, everything that I was eating, every therapy I was doing. It got to a point where I would go into severe anaphylaxis almost every food I was eating, or I'd go into a grand mal seizure. And so that became very dangerous very quickly because I was losing foods. And then eventually I got to the point where I was reacting to water. Crazy. I didn't even think that was possible, but I got to a point, it was like some waters I would react to, the mineral composition was different. I was that sensitive where I would put a drop of water on my tongue and I would go into a seizure, right? It was one of the craziest things ever. And I was in Dallas, Texas, and I was quarantined before quarantining was cool. Because I could get exposed to like fragrances or chemicals or cleaning products and go into seizures. So I had to be quarantined. Wow. And I was basically dying. I was in intensive care and everything, and it was drastic. So I had a great set of strategies and I had a great network of doctors that before I started to get the sick was helping some, but couldn't implement anything. So the only thing that would help, I was on high doses of benzodiazepines that would reduce the seizure activity to allow me to eat some food. But I eventually started reacting to those two, and it was hugely problematic. I ended up going a long period of time without water, several days. At one point, I had to go completely without drinking anything, and I was having seizures so violently, I almost died from dehydration. I was able to stop those reactions through the integration of the drugs, but the drugs are incredibly addictive. And as we know, as I said from earlier, borrowing from tomorrow to pay for today, if you use benzodiazepines to control seizures, eventually your seizures are going to get worse because you're lowering your seizure threshold because you're stealing the inhibitory chemicals that are being released to reduce the seizures. So you have less of them after the drug wears off. So then the seizures go more violently in the system. It's the same reason why when people withdraw from benzos, they can have seizures because the body will ricochet in the opposite direction. But I was already having seizures on top of that. So if I were to go in withdrawal, it would have killed me. So I had to find a transitional strategy off benzodiazepines pretty quickly. So I went back into my research and everything and was looking at plant-based alternatives to benzos that could help me safely transition off of them. Didn't think I was going to find anything that was powerful enough. Obviously tried cannabis and everything, didn't work, didn't really help for what I was experiencing. And then I came across Kava. I had tried kava in capsule form, health food store grade kava. Not the same thing at all by definition. It's kava in capsules at health food store shelves in America is like chamomile tea. It's mildly sedative, not a bad little herb, but not kava. Kava is the full constituent mixture, the drink that's prepared from the roots of Piper methysticum, a shrub that grows in the Polynesian islands in the South Pacific, right? So this is a medicinal elixir, a substance that has powerful effects on not only the body, but on the mind and on the psyche. And it has psychedelic qualities as well, too, that leave a person sober and unaffected, which is very unique. So it's more of like a psychological thing, less visual. In high dosages, you have to take high dosages to get up to that. In low dosages, it's more like microdosing almost, where it kind of gives you that integrated thinking, empathetic thinking, conversation gets really open and amazing, but you feel totally sober. So I'll digress from that. But basically, I came across a South Pacific Islander who I got to be friends with through some of my networking and sourcing and stuff. And it just was at the right time where I was basically dying from this stuff. And he was like, "Have you tried kava?" I was like, "Yeah, I tried kava." And he was like, "Well, what'd you try?" I told him. He laughed. He's like, "Dude, that's not real kava. Like that's like a joke to us. Like that's not, because what they drink every day is like the real stuff." So I was like, "Really? Okay, great. How do I get a hold of it?" He sends me fresh frozen kava, very strong strain. There's like 200 different strains, just like with cannabis. And he sends it to me fresh frozen, which is like the strongest form of it, right? Even stronger than the products that we have, retail. It's like stuff that they would drink at a kava bar there. They have bars there that supply kava. So he sent it to me. He told me how to prepare it as this long process. I squeeze it into a bowl and end up with this muddy water, drink it. It's nasty, but I'm happy to drink it. And within 2 weeks, my seizures had reduced by like 80 to 90%. Within 2 months, I was completely off benzodiazepines. That is a miracle. That is literally a miracle, because if you can get off of them, it takes healthier people. If you're taking benzos, you're probably not super healthy. But it takes, healthier people a year and a half to taper from long-term benzo use usually. So, 2 months I was off, and I was able to now start tolerating supplements, therapies, foods. I was able to eat again. I was able to get my strength back. So kava was an amazing leverage tool that helped get me off of benzos. And it was this miraculous thing that helped to lower my stress system and my seizure, process. So then I started using it in the network of doctors that I started working with them. And they had me go in and create protocols for it and different things. And I started, creating those, and we started to reproduce this thing on benzodiazepine withdrawal, dozens, if not hundreds of times. Right. So this was amazing. And kava is actually very well researched too. It's there's a lot of good science on it. It's one of the most well-researched herbs in the world outside of cannabis and ginseng and some of those. So we have a lot of the mechanisms in place as well too. So I started diving into that, dove, full force into the kava industry, into the indigenous people in the South Pacific, started, meeting everybody in the South Pacific and stuff, and diving into kava and its historical context, and wanted to get a real feel for its indigenous use. And just was blown away step by step on how deep this story actually went and how amazing this medicine was, and that it was basically hidden off and it was barely known about, basically. Like in the Western world, it's barely known about, and the level at which it is, it's not real kava. It's not like their actual medicine. So we started building the framework for what eventually became the True Kava Project, which is not just about producing product. It's an advocacy campaign and a movement where we're working with regulatory agencies to establish a framework for kava in the modern world, to try to integrate this into Western culture, because where we see kava exists in cultures, we see better tight-knit communities, we see better mental health, we see closer interaction between people, more empathy, stuff like that, better psychological health, better physical health, lower rates of cancer and things as well too, because it's got mechanisms there. So the effects of kava are very much like alcohol, but mixed in with a little bit of the entheogenic thing as well too, but without the drunkenness. So it takes some of the best effects of alcohol, coffee, CBD, and psychedelics, and kind of wraps them into one thing that almost everybody can tolerate. Right? It's more subtle than your psychedelics, right? Way more subtle, but it still has that thing in the background there that is great for people to dip their toes into in a safe way. And over time, if psilocybin shouts a message at you, kava kind of whispers it, right? And especially in high dosages. So the indigenous people of the South Pacific consider kava their most sacred medicine, even more sacred than classic psychedelics, because they can take it all the time regularly, and they believe that it has a more gradual but profound psyche over the long term, because you can constantly be in this state where you can slowly integrate the message that you learn instead of being whacked with a sledgehammer of a stronger psychedelic. There's a time and a place for the stronger psychedelics, absolutely. But the kava is another option. It's just a different thing. It's a different approach. But so basically it induces empathy, it induces higher mood, relaxation, and then mental clarity. It elicits a state of kind of calm focus. So it's good as like a nootropic. It's good to enhance sleep, and it's good to just process and protect you from the damaging effects of stress, and allow you to move through stress more fluently, and allow you to reflect on your past traumas from a place of relaxation, which can help you rewire your association with those traumas over time, which is why the studies on kava and PTSD we're expecting to be pretty substantial in the future.
So you mentioned there's like 200 strains, and then also I believe you have 2 different kinds as well that you offer. What's the difference between yours? Because I saw there's one nootropic one, and then there was another oil as well.
Yeah. So right now we have 3 different products that are on the site. We've got the oils, which there's just 2 strains of the oil basically, and there's the Kavaplex oil is the entry-level product. That's the most subtle product that anyone can tolerate at any time of the day, virtually, even kids, right? So we wanted to make that one more subtle, runs in the background, but still have the general broad spectrum effects of kava. It's more like a functional food, like an MCT oil, but that has these effects. You can even mix it with coffee and MCT and get this really synergistic mind effect.
I did that actually. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I didn't even think that you would want to mix it with coffee, but it was great, man.
It's great. The coffee actually enhances the uptake, the caffeine, because of the vasodilatation and stuff. It helps to get the lactones into the brain. The MCT helps as well, because the lactones are lipids, and the MCT acts as like a lipid raft for them. So it's a great synergy there. Really, really is great. So that's like an entry-level product. The shots that we have are stronger. That has more of, in high dosages, more of the euphoric effect, the subtle mind effect that you would get from, drinking kava at a kava bar or an alcohol alternative. We have a drink line that's in the works right now that we're going to be launching retail and probably online as well too. That's a carbonated drink, just like you would have a beer with someone, you would have a kava. And that's really kava's best usage. Is I truly believe that kava has the ability to do in modern culture what only coffee and alcohol have been able to accomplish. Although, basically, coffee and alcohol have been the 2, commodities that have helped shape the social and productivity structure of our entire culture. And a lot of people don't understand how profound that actually is. But Michael Pollan, wrote, a book recently, and he was on Rogan's show talking about how coffee helped to shape the collective mind of Western culture, and was talking about how the introduction of coffee breaks drastically changed productivity in corporations in America. And the mindset and the way at which the whole machine runs is very, very much induced by being on this psychoactive substance known as caffeine. And alcohol did a lot to shape the social context, whether it be for better or for worse. It definitely has shaped our entire social structure, because go anywhere where social, circumstances in community is present and try not to find alcohol, you're only going to go to churches, and sometimes you even find it there, and so now the problem with alcohol is that it's a double-edged sword, is that even though culture is moving towards healthier alternatives to everything, like we're all looking for, that's why sugar has become a bad name, even in more mainstream areas. People are looking for lower sugar, higher protein, better fats. People are looking for no, GMOs and all this kind of stuff, pesticides, organic food. But we still have kind of this dark cloud, this guilty pleasure in alcohol that everybody still fully embraces, because there's no alternative to it. Basically, it's like people are like, okay, I'll give up the GMO foods, I'll give up all this, but don't touch my drinking, because that's how I connect with people. That's how I loosen up at the end of the day and engage in community, which is one of our highest aspirations as humans, is to engage in community and connect with one another. Gives us a sense of purpose, gives us a sense of our tribe, our community. Our health falls apart without it, which is why during COVID we see health falling apart even more, not being able to engage together. But
Yeah.
anyways, Kava has this unique ability. In the islands, it is their alcohol, except for it creates healthy, very healthy environments. You'll never see a fight break out at a Kava bar. It just doesn't happen because
Yeah.
the type of mind state that it puts you in is that more thought provoked, sort of very genuine, authentic, sort of higher depth, state of mind where you'll have great, very good conversations over Kava with people. In fact, in the islands, if you go into the villages in Vanuatu, the chief, where the chief of the village still has full reign over the decision making, if there's two parties that have a dispute amongst the village, he will force them to sit down and settle it over Kava. That's standard procedure. Like they're just forced to stop and sit down and have Kava together.
That's amazing.
Because they believe that it's so powerful at opening people up and inducing conflict resolution and bringing people together that it's sort of like a peace offering. It's a symbol of connection. So that's where we see Kava's highest applications. That's why we wanted to design a drink line that we can eventually have on tap and integrate into the marketplace at every layer possible, to where we can help to facilitate, the integration of what we believe a healthier commodity that can help make an impact on the way that we socialize.
Well, I'm ready for it, because drinking near beer, that ain't the game for me.
It's not.
And I don't drink booze. So it would be great to have it. And when I've had your product, I've loved it. And I've tried other kavas, like you said, with the whole bag and mashing it up situation. And what kind of strains are there? Like, what is a strong strain versus like a weak strain? Why is that? Like you mentioned, there's over like 200, just like weed, if you smoke some trees, like there's different effects with it. Like, what's that world like in terms of kava?
Yeah, it's just, it's the same as with cannabis. There's a broad spectrum of effects that are generally attributed to kava, but within that, there's some that teeter more towards certain active constituents than others. There's different ratios depending on how they've been bred and how they've been grown, and how they've been selected for. So the active constituents in it are called kava lactones. There's more actives as well too, but just like in cannabis, there's cannabinoids, then there's terpenes, then there's flavonoids. Same with kava. And the ratios of those constituents are going to vary, and it's going to create a different signature in how it affects the body. But they all reside in kind of a general broad spectrum of effects that are similar, but like some may be more on the heady side, some may be more on the heavy side, some may be more in the head, some you get more of the nootropic euphoria, some you get more of the sedating body sort of side of things. But
is there like categories for those? Is I guess what I'm trying to like figure out, like that landscape. Is there a category of the more like heady, say nootropic kind, a category of the like more sedative, a category of like what did you just say, like the more kind of just chill, relaxing?
Well, not official categories, because it's a mixed bag, because a lot of them have a mixture of all of these effects. So it's hard to place them in defined categories because it's not that clear. It's a complex living organism, right? So you have nuances of these things. You have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, you have a lot of these. What we've done is, instead of making a bunch of different isolated strains at first before we go into the medical space for this, where it needs to be highly specialized, we've tried to dial it into mixtures that give the broadest range of effects that are the most applicable to the most amount of people, right? That's not too heady, not too heavy. It kind of gives the general broad spectrum of everything. We wanted it to be sort of calm, relaxed, focused, not sedative. We want it to lead to a good sleep, but we don't want it to be sedative for these products. We want it to be something like alcohol, like it gets you engaged, it gets you euphoric, but yet relaxed and open, right? And that's generally what most people want from kava. Some people want a specialized one that knocks them out. Some people want like a super like nootropic type of strain. Our complex mind is a little bit more of that, but it's in the more subtle oil form, so it's not like a massive amount. So there aren't really categories like even with cannabis, there aren't really. There's the two species, people think of it as indica and sativa. But really within that, there are indicas that can be, cognitive and stimulating, as where they're normally thought of as the heavy ones. And then there are sativas that can be, relaxing as well. it's a very nuanced thing. So
Mm-hmm.
there, you have to go strain by strain and know the strains and the mixtures really.
Mm.
But Vanuatu kavas, for example, are mostly what we use. That's where most of the world's kava comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Vanuatu is an island chain right next to Fiji, and they are the most balanced kavas. That they give a deep relaxation effect, very similar to alcohol, but also a very euphoric effect at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
As where the strains from Tonga are more straight up euphoric because they bred them for that. They wanted those characteristics. They bred them for that over a long period of time. So the
Mm-hmm.
strains that they have there or that are available are basically more of that,
Mm-hmm.
but Vanuatu strains give you really that broad spectrum of what we like the most at a strength that we really like. And getting it where we spent years developing a kava supply chain where we controlled every step of the process, where we could do it without pesticides and all this stuff, and be able to test every batch, making sure it was 100% root material, because that's crucial with kava too. You don't want to consume the aerial parts. The aerial parts make it into a lot of kavas, so that means leaves and stems. They can have toxic components in them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where kava's gotten a little bit of a bad reputation, is from quality control, not kava itself. So we have everything third-party lab tested in the islands and in the States, and we've developed methods of stabilizing them into forms that are, you don't have to prepare and squeeze, and that still maintain therapeutic relevance and that taste good. The drink tastes really good.
Cool.
I need to get you some of the drink, because the drink is really, really great.
That sounds like the best thing ever. I'm like, dude, where's my 6-pack, bro? Where's my 12-pack or my 24?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I loved your product, because number one, you don't have to go through the whole process. Even though, when I was doing that, I didn't really mind it that much, but to have it like in a tincture or a dropper was just really easy, or combining it, say, with the coffee, it was just really nice as well.
Don't, for the, people like us that are willing to dive in, we don't mind it that much. But even us doing it every day or constantly, you don't always have the time, and you're just like, you have to, and then you get to a point where you get so like, you want to just crack something open, like you would crack open a beer or something.
Yep.
But the average person, it's completely out of the question to do that, right? Like the mass market is not going to spend 45 minutes squeezing a peppery root and then drink muddy water. It's just not going to happen,
Yeah.
So,
well, that's what I was doing. Like this summer, even we were going out to these different musical events in our town and whatnot, and everybody's got their beers and whatnot. I'm like telling my fiance, wait, hold on, I got to play around with this bowl and some water and a little cloth to squeeze this stuff out. And then I would put it in my mason jars, and I'd have my top on, so I could just kind of drink it throughout the event. But also that kind of brings me to another question. I mean, yes, I want to be able to just pop it open and rock and roll. That would be great. Now, when I was making it, I would notice like a lot of the stuff would start to settle on the bottom. And I used like, I guess the best strainer I could find, or like the thinnest, whatever you call it. I don't know. But anyway, I would notice there was this little bit of stuff that would build up. Is that stuff you should drink? Because I'm assuming like that's root particles. So if I didn't drink that stuff on the bottom, does it have the what do you call them, lactones?
Yeah. Okay. So
like, what's that all about?
If you just prepare it traditionally, that is one of the big problems as well too. Previously, that's how I had to consume it whenever I was getting well, because there was no shelf stable, ready to drink form of it that was tasty and easy to use. It was either get the stuff off the health food store shelf, which didn't do hardly anything to me, or get the real stuff, prepare it, and have. The problem is that filtration was something that we really had to develop and dial in, because it's hard to filter it just right to where you get the stuff you don't want out, but keep the good stuff in that's active, right?
Yeah.
Because if you filter it too much, then you'll pull out some of the supportive constituents that give life to the whole thing and depth to the overall experience, right? And you don't want that. But the thing is that if you do it with just a regular strainer bag, then you'll get quite a bit of sediment, tannins, root fibers, and things that in some people, you drink high amounts of kava, several shells. It can create stomach upset. It can create some side effects, and it can just not taste so good. So it's not like that sediment on the bottom definitely has goodies in it, but it also has a lot of fibers
baddies.
And stuff. Yeah. Well, I mean, not as much baddies. I mean, if you're getting good kava, if you don't know your kava, you could be getting aerial parts. You could be getting undesirable strains. You could be getting mycotoxins. You could be getting pesticides. You could be getting a lot of things. But for the most part, if you're getting good kava, it's not as much bad, but it still could cause some roughage and just not as good of an experience. You know what I mean? Like it's not, you can't drink as much of it as where with a filtered product like we're using, you can drink way more of it and have a very smooth experience and not have that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, because I did notice that if I drank a lot of it, my stomach would not feel like horrible, but I was like,
Yeah.
it's a little funky. And I was
And
wondering
that,
if it was because I was drinking the sediment too, because I was like, I don't want to
yes,
lose the goodies.
almost always. And that's the thing, is that
So
having
what
it
do
in a
you do?
refined form.
Okay, so if you want to like, I also think like the kind of ritual behind it every now and then, like I was doing it every single day. It's great to have a dropper where I don't have to do that and where it's not getting in the way of my life. But at the same time, like every now and then, I think there's this interesting aspect to having a couple people around and preparing it together.
100%.
There's
Yeah, for
that.
sure.
So like, how the hell do you find a good one if you do want to have that kind of ritual preparation where you are doing it in kind of that communal setting?
Well, to find a good kava, I mean, you really kind of have to know the ropes. I mean, I can give you some places where you can get some to have around. I can even send you some and everything. But outside of that, it's kind of like the Wild West if you're trying to, because we don't sell just bags of traditional kava just because we're trying to go for a broader scale, integration to the culture instead of a niche thing. However, it's like we all here still, use the traditional prep because I love the traditional thing periodically as well.
Yeah, periodically.
And honestly, you can make an even stronger brew than what you can get in our drinks many times because you can get it up to concentrations that's not like our retail ready products. You can get it to a more recreational level. In the future, we're going to be releasing a drink line that's going to be much higher potency, that's going to be fresh kava stabilized, even stronger than what you get from that dried powder in its strongest form. And you may have not even had really strong kava strains prepared, traditionally. I don't know where you've gotten yours from, but
Squanch was one of the companies.
Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. I mean, there's some that's quite a bit stronger for sure. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's our
so you're
product line
gonna
in the
do a
future.
drink even above that, which is like just straight.
Our current drink is good, but it's still mass retail ready. So you don't want to knock someone on their ass, whenever they're at a checkout counter or whenever they're,
so probably not a good way to start introducing it.
And whenever I say knock people on their ass, I don't mean like even the strongest kava is not even a bad way, but it still can give you a very strong effect that's very, that's just very noticeable and can be distracting to a person who's had it the first time, or can be a little much, right?
Yeah.
But it's amazing experience. Like if getting fully kava, kavafied, getting to like a ceremonial level of kava intake of like 10 shells of like a regular or 5 shells of a really strong brew, like the one the drink line that we're making for the future is going to come like in like wine bottles. It's going to be like a fine wine. It's going to be a super strong. So you just pop it open and it'll have like the fresh kava and the tasting and carbonated and the whole thing. Wow. And it'll be something that'll be like the equivalent of what you would get in a large amount, from the shells. So less of a retail, more of a straight up alcohol alternative.
Wow.
And ceremonial thing, but yeah, so that's what we have coming in the future.
When can we look forward to these drinks you're talking about? I'm like, dude, next week is this coming in? Like, let's go.
So the first drinks, we already have some. We're going to be releasing that retail relatively soon, probably first quarter of this next year.
Cool.
And we had those. We actually did our first showcasing of them at the Bulletproof conference. The super recreational one's not going to come for, a bit in the future, but the ones that come in the cans that I was telling you about, you can drink a lot of them still and still get to those places, are very good. Yeah. So we released that at the Bulletproof conference. We had actually loaded Luke up with a lot of them. So you ask him how he likes them, but
call him.
Yeah. Yes. He loves them. So I'll have to get you some of them, see what you think, get some feedback.
Yeah. I'd love it. I think that's just a brilliant idea, man. That's so cool. Because like it's a process, and if you don't know, like you're saying, where to get it from and all that, like you might not do it, or you might just do it a little bit and let it kind of go by the wayside. But if you have it accessible like that, and there's the different grades and everything, and behind it there's like a different purpose, it's like I've never heard of anybody doing it. So.
It's one of the most versatile therapeutic, like functional beverage substances that exists, and it's just, there's so many ways in which you can go wrong, dilute it and make it taste bad or make it have side effects. That's why no one has done it. and allocating enough supply to where you can scale it into the masses. It takes a lot to try to structure something like this. And actually knowing the kava well enough to even know what you're dealing with, to asking the right questions to get the right answers. So no, it's just something that I really feel as though kava can make a substantial positive net impact on the culture from a grand perspective. And it has such an amazing therapeutic application, and it has with almost no side effects when you get it in its safe, smooth form. And it's just an amazing medicine that the world needs, and is a great alternative to much more dangerous substances. And it is a great off ramp to those substances as well too. If I had kava when I was trying to get off drugs, I mean, I did whenever, later on, but when I was, drinking a lot of alcohol and stuff, oh my gosh, if I had it in college, I would have been like, dude, I love this stuff. I don't feel like shit the next day. I don't have a hangover, and I feel great. I feel open. It gives me exactly what I want without all the nonsense. And it's like, it's just, to me, it's a no brainer. It really, the world needs it. And so that's one thing that we're trying to work to do to make it available.
Well, I think we have arrived at the end. I know you got things to do. I got things to do. But before we go, I would love to, if you could share with us, where can people find you? Where can they find your products? XYZ.
So we're True Kava, TRU Kava. You can find us at trukava.com. All the information, research, products, everything like that's there. On social media at True Kava, Instagram, obviously Facebook, everything. So just search TRU Kava anywhere, and you'll find our content, interviews, videos, all kinds of stuff. So,
and very soon you'll be having your kava drinks, whether it's in the can, it sounds like, or wine bottles. So stay tuned, folks. It's on the way. It's in the works. So Cameron, thanks for joining us today, man. I really appreciate the depth of knowledge and all the experience that you bring to the table, from your story all the way down to the science, and going through psychedelics with us and a little bit of that, plus diving into kava today. Really appreciate it, man.
Oh yeah, man. Thanks so much. I'm glad we finally got this going.
We made it happen.